I'm Mia, 28 years old, and 3 hours before my $120,000 wedding, I'm standing in the bridal suite bathroom staring at my reflection, while my sister Rachel holds my hair back as I throw up pure anxiety. The Grandview Manor is buzzing with 300 guests downstairs. My dress is hanging like a white silk dream, and I should be feeling like a princess. Instead, I'm wondering if spending more on this one day than most people make in 2 years was the smartest financial decision I've ever made. But you know what? Sometimes you only get one shot at perfection, and after 8 years with David, I wanted everything to be flawless. Rachel rubs my back with that older sister efficiency she's perfected over 31 years. You're going to be fine, Mia. This is just nerves. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by your own wedding planning. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up to 6 months earlier, when this whole circus began. David proposed on a Tuesday, because apparently he read somewhere that Tuesday proposals are more authentic than weekend ones. Sweet man, but his timing has always been questionable. We're both architects, which sounds romantic until you realize we spent 3 months debating whether the ceremony arch should be geometric or organic in design. David wanted clean lines. I wanted romance. We compromised on expensive, very expensive. The venue alone was $45,000. The flowers? Another $12,000, because apparently roses in March cost more than my college textbooks. The photographer charged $8,000, claiming he was capturing memories, not just taking pictures. I wondered if he'd capture the exact moment my bank account wept. Rachel had been surprisingly involved in the planning process. More involved than I expected, actually. She'd show up to vendor meetings, offer opinions on everything from napkin colors to menu choices, and always volunteer to handle the little details I was too busy to manage. I just want everything to be perfect for you, she'd say, and I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She's my sister. Looking back now, I should have noticed the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she talked about the wedding, the way she'd make subtle comments about the cost, the guest list, the extravagance of it all. But I was so caught up in the whirlwind of planning that I missed all the warning signs. The morning flew by in a blur of hair and makeup artists, bridesmaids squealing over mimosas, and my mother crying happy tears every 15 minutes. Rachel stayed close, playing the perfect maid of honor, making sure everyone had what they needed. You look absolutely stunning, she told me as the stylist put the final touches on my hair. Her voice carried just the slightest edge that I couldn't quite identify. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, reception immediately following. Everything had been planned down to the minute. Nothing could go wrong. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. Rachel has always been the complicated one in our family. 3 years older, perpetually single, and carrying the weight of being the daughter who had so much potential, but somehow never quite lived up to it. Don't get me wrong. She's successful. Marketing director at a mid-sized firm, nice apartment, drives a decent car. But she's also the sister who still compares herself to everyone around her, especially me. Growing up, the comparisons were constant but subtle. Mia gets straight A's so effortlessly, my mother would say, not meaning to hurt Rachel but somehow always managing to. Rachel works so hard for her B's. It created this weird dynamic where Rachel simultaneously played the protective older sister and the secretly resentful one. She'd defend me against anyone else, then make cutting little comments when we were alone. When I got into architecture school, she made jokes about me being the artistic one. When I landed my first job, she mentioned how nice it must be to have natural talent. When David proposed, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Finally, someone sees what I see in you." At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I wonder what exactly she saw. The thing about Rachel is that she's incredibly good at being helpful. She volunteers for everything, organizes family gatherings, remembers birthdays, brings soup when you're sick. She's the sister who shows up. But she's also the sister who's been watching my life unfold with increasing bitterness, especially after her last relationship ended 6 months ago. Brad just wasn't ready for commitment, she'd explained when they broke up. Some men are intimidated by strong women, I nodded sympathetically. But honestly, Brad seemed like a decent guy who simply realized they weren't compatible. Rachel has this way of making every relationship failure about the other person's inadequacies, rather than examining her own patterns. The wedding planning brought out both sides of her personality. Helpful Rachel showed up to every appointment, took detailed notes, coordinated with vendors when I was swamped at work. But I also caught glimpses of something else. Like when she accidentally scheduled a cake tasting during my birthday dinner, forcing me to choose between family time and wedding preparation. Or when she suggested we should scale back some of the more expensive elements because people will think you're showing off. I'm just looking out for you, she'd say whenever I questioned her suggestions. You know how people talk. The week before the wedding, Rachel's helpfulness went into overdrive. She volunteered to handle the final vendor confirmations, offered to coordinate the rehearsal dinner seating, insisted on personally overseeing the reception setup. You should be relaxing, she kept saying. Let big sister take care of everything. I was grateful, honestly. Work had been insane, and having someone I trusted managing the details felt like a gift. Rachel had never let me down before. We were sisters. We were family. That Thursday night at my bachelorette party, Rachel made sure everyone's drinks stayed full. She was the perfect hostess, taking photos, organizing games, making sure I had the time of my life. To Mia, she toasted, raising her glass with what looked like genuine love. My little sister, who deserves all the happiness in the world. I hugged her tight, feeling lucky to have someone who cared about me so much. I had no idea she was already planning to destroy everything. The week before the wedding, strange little things started happening that I should have paid attention to. Rachel began asking oddly specific questions about my tolerance for alcohol. Remember when we went wine tasting and you got so dizzy after just 2 glasses? She'd laugh. You've always been such a lightweight. She also developed a sudden interest in the reception timeline. What time is your maid of honor speech again? She'd ask, consulting her phone like she was checking something important. And the photographer will be filming everything, right? Have you ever experienced weird behavior from someone close to you right before a big event? Drop a comment below about your own family drama moments. Then there was the vendor conversation I accidentally overheard. Rachel was on the phone with someone, speaking in hushed tones about making sure everything goes according to plan, and something about timing being crucial. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, just coordinating with the florist about delivery schedules. You know how these vendors are. They need everything spelled out. The night before the wedding, Rachel insisted on staying at the hotel with me. Sisters shouldn't spend their last night as single women alone, she said, arriving with a bottle of champagne and a suspicious amount of energy for someone who claimed to be exhausted from all the wedding preparations. We ordered room service and spent hours going over the next day's schedule. Rachel had printed out detailed timelines for everyone involved. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, photographers, even the musicians. Her organization impressed me. You've thought of everything, I told her, genuinely touched by her attention to detail. She smiled that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I just want tomorrow to be memorable. At some point during the evening, Rachel started talking about our childhood, specifically about all the times I'd gotten attention that she felt she deserved. Remember when I won the science fair in 8th grade? She said, sipping her champagne. But everyone kept talking about your art project that got 2nd place. I didn't remember it that way, but I nodded anyway. Rachel had been drinking more than usual, and I figured she was just feeling nostalgic and emotional. Or when I made honor roll for 3 straight semesters, but Mom and Dad only seemed to notice when you made it once. Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before, a bitterness that made me uncomfortable. Rachel, you know Mom and Dad are proud of both of us, I said carefully. Are they? She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Tomorrow everyone's going to be looking at you, celebrating you, talking about how perfect your life is. The way she said perfect sent a chill down my spine. It's not perfect, I protested. You know David and I have had our struggles. The long hours, the stress of planning this wedding, the financial pressure. Poor Mia, Rachel interrupted, her tone sharp, having to deal with the stress of a $120,000 wedding that most people only dream of. I stared at her, wondering where this hostility was coming from. This wasn't the supportive sister who'd been helping me plan for months. I'm sorry if you think I'm being ungrateful, I said quietly. I know we're fortunate to be able to afford this. Rachel's expression softened immediately, like she realized she'd gone too far. No, I'm sorry, I'm just tired and emotional. Tomorrow is going to be beautiful, Mia. You deserve to be happy. But the damage was done. Something had shifted between us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my sister resented me more than I'd ever realized. That night, I barely slept. The morning of my wedding dawned perfect. Crisp March air, brilliant sunshine streaming through the bridal suite windows, and not a cloud in the sky. Even the weather seemed determined to make my day flawless. The hair and makeup team arrived at 8 sharp, transforming our suite into a bustling salon. My bridesmaids trickled in over the next hour, filling the space with excited chatter and the pop of champagne corks. Rachel appeared with coffee and pastries from the hotel's bakery, playing the perfect maid of honor role again. Whatever darkness I'd glimpsed the night before seemed to have evaporated. How's our bride feeling? She asked, settling beside me as the makeup artist worked on my eyes. Nervous, I admitted, but good nervous. Like, this is really happening nervous. It's going to be perfect, Rachel said, squeezing my hand. I've made sure of that. The morning flew by in a blur of preparations. Photos of me getting ready, bridesmaids struggling into their dresses, my mother crying happy tears every few minutes. Rachel orchestrated everything with military precision, ensuring everyone knew their places and timing. By 3 o'clock, I was fully dressed in my grandmother's silk gown, looking like something out of a magazine. The photographer captured every moment, me alone, with my bridesmaids, with my parents, with Rachel. These are going to be stunning, the photographer kept saying. The light in here is absolutely perfect. Rachel seemed particularly interested in the photography equipment. She asked detailed questions about the cameras, the live stream setup for guests who couldn't attend, and especially about the reception coverage. You'll be filming everything tonight, right? She confirmed. Every speech, every moment? Absolutely, the photographer assured her. We've got cameras stationed throughout the venue, plus the main videographer will be capturing all the key moments. Rachel nodded, satisfied. Perfect. At 3:30, my father knocked on the door. It was time. The ceremony itself passed in a dreamlike haze. Walking down the aisle toward David, who looked impossibly handsome in his black tuxedo. The gasps from our guests when they saw my dress. The weight of my grandmother's veil trailing behind me. Rachel walked ahead of me as maid of honor, looking elegant in her navy blue dress. She'd chosen the color herself, claiming it would photograph beautifully against the garden backdrop. She was right, she looked stunning. David's vows made me cry, smearing my supposedly waterproof makeup. My vows made him laugh, which was exactly what I'd hoped for. When we kissed as husband and wife, the entire garden erupted in cheers. The photographer and videographer captured everything. The rice throwing, okay, bubbles, because rice is apparently bad for birds. The family photos, the candid moments of pure joy. As we walked back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Hartford, I caught Rachel's eye. She was clapping and smiling, but there was something in her expression that made me uneasy. A look of satisfaction that seemed oddly out of place. Ready for the party, Mrs. Hartford? David whispered in my ear as we posed for more photos. I squeezed his hand, trying to shake off the strange feeling Rachel's look had given me. Ready. The cocktail hour was magical. Guests mingled on the terrace overlooking the gardens, while servers passed champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Everyone kept telling us how perfect everything looked, how beautiful the ceremony had been, how happy we seemed. Rachel worked the crowd like a professional, making sure everyone felt welcomed and entertained. She really was the perfect maid of honor, and I felt guilty for doubting her motives. At 6 o'clock, the wedding planner announced it was time to move into the ballroom for dinner and dancing. That's when the real party began. The ballroom at Grandview Manor looked like something from a fairy tale. Soft lighting, cascading flowers, tables set with crystal and gold accents that caught the light from the chandeliers overhead. Our 300 guests found their seats while the band played soft jazz. David and I made our entrance to thunderous applause, then took our places at the head table. Rachel sat to my left, David to my right, with our parents and closest friends filling out the rest of the table. "This is incredible, Mia," my college roommate Sarah whispered from across the table. "You've outdone yourself." I smiled, feeling proud of what we'd accomplished. Every detail was exactly as I'd envisioned, from the menu to the floral arrangements, to the way the lighting made everything glow. The first course was served, a delicate butternut squash soup that had everyone raving. Rachel made sure my wine glass stayed full, playing the attentive maid of honor perfectly. "You should eat more," she kept saying. "It's going to be a long night." She was right. Between courses, David and I made rounds to each table, thanking guests for coming, accepting congratulations, posing for photos with family and friends we hadn't seen in years. Rachel stayed close, often appearing with a fresh drink just as mine emptied. "Can't have the bride getting dehydrated," she'd laugh, pressing another glass of champagne into my hand. I appreciated her attentiveness, even though I was already feeling a little lightheaded. The day had been long, I'd barely eaten anything due to nerves, and the champagne was going straight to my head. "Maybe I should slow down on the alcohol," I mentioned to Rachel during a quiet moment. "Nonsense," she said firmly. "It's your wedding day. Live a little." The dinner courses continued. Herb-crusted salmon that melted in your mouth, perfectly prepared vegetables. A wine pairing that had our sommelier friend nodding approvingly. Everything was flawless. Rachel had positioned herself strategically at our table, with easy access to the drinks and a clear view of the room. She seemed to be monitoring something, checking her watch frequently and scanning the crowd. "The photographer is getting some great shots," she mentioned casually as the main course plates were cleared. "He's been filming everything from multiple angles." "Good," I said absently, focused on a conversation with my new mother-in-law about our honeymoon plans. During a lull between courses, Rachel offered to refresh my drink again. "I'll get us both something fresh," she said, picking up our champagne flutes. I nodded, distracted by a guest who'd approached to congratulate us. By the time I looked back, Rachel was returning with 2 new glasses of champagne. "Special vintage," she said with a smile, handing me the flute. "The hotel manager said it's their best." I took a sip. It tasted slightly different from the champagne we'd been drinking all evening. A little sweeter, with an odd aftertaste I couldn't identify. But I was too caught up in the celebration to think much about it. Within minutes, I started feeling strange. More than just tipsy, actually dizzy, like the room was tilting slightly. My vision felt soft around the edges, and I had to concentrate harder to follow conversations. "Are you feeling okay?" David asked, noticing me swaying slightly in my chair. "Just tired," I said quickly. "It's been a long day." But Rachel was watching me with an expression of intense focus. Not concern, something more calculating. She seemed to be waiting for something. "Maybe we should get you some water," David suggested. "I'll get it," Rachel volunteered immediately, standing up before anyone else could offer. As she walked away, I caught sight of the photographer adjusting his equipment near the dance floor. The main camera was positioned to capture our table perfectly, with a clear view of every guest and every interaction. That's when I noticed Rachel hadn't gone toward the bar or the kitchen. Instead, she was approaching the photographer, speaking to him in urgent whispers while gesturing toward our table. Something cold settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with the champagne. The dizziness was getting worse. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself as Rachel returned with a glass of water that I definitely hadn't seen her get from anywhere. "Here you go, sweetie," she said, setting it down with that same calculating look in her eyes. This should help. But I wasn't looking at the water. I was staring at Rachel's face, finally seeing what had been right in front of me all along. The satisfaction, the anticipation, the way she kept checking her watch like she was waiting for something specific to happen. David was deep in conversation with his best man about golf, completely oblivious to my growing confusion. The room felt like it was moving in slow motion, sounds becoming muffled and distant. That's when I saw it. Rachel thought I was too out of it to notice, but I caught her reaching into her small beaded purse and pulling out what looked like a tiny vial. She glanced around quickly to make sure no one was watching, then moved toward the champagne flutes lined up for the toast. My champagne flute, the one I'd been drinking from all evening. But she wasn't the only one who noticed. The photographer, Marcus, I think his name was, had been adjusting his camera angle to capture the head table. His lens was pointed directly at the champagne setup when Rachel made her move. I watched in horrible fascination as my sister, my maid of honor, the person I trusted most in this room, emptied that small vial into my drink. She stirred it quickly with her finger, then stepped back with a satisfied smile. Marcus caught it all on camera. Every single second. Our eyes met across the room, the photographer and mine. His expression shifted from professional concentration to shock as he realized what he'd just filmed. He looked at me, then back at his camera, then at me again with a question in his eyes. I managed a tiny nod, my head spinning but my mind suddenly crystal clear. Rachel returned to her seat, acting perfectly normal. "Feeling better?" she asked sweetly. "Much better," I lied, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. The speeches were scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Rachel would be speaking first, as maid of honor, followed by David's best man, and then our parents. She'd planned this perfectly. Get me impaired enough to embarrass myself publicly, right in front of 300 guests, with everything being recorded for posterity. Whatever she'd put in my drink was supposed to kick in during the most important part of the evening. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd been so focused on making sure the cameras captured my humiliation that she hadn't considered they might capture her crime instead. I excused myself to the bathroom, walking carefully to maintain my balance. Marcus intercepted me near the hallway, his camera equipment in hand. "Mrs. Hartford," he said quietly, "I think you need to see something." We ducked into a small alcove where he showed me the camera's display screen. There it was, clear as day. Rachel adulterating my drink while glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. I looked back toward the ballroom, where Rachel was now standing at the microphone, tapping it to get everyone's attention. She looked radiant in the spotlight, every inch the loving, supportive sister. "How quickly can you get this footage ready to display?" I asked. Marcus smiled grimly. "Give me 5 minutes." The show was about to begin, and Rachel had no idea she was about to become the star. Marcus worked with the efficiency of someone who'd dealt with wedding emergencies before, though I'm guessing he'd never had to prep evidence of familial sabotage on someone's special day. The projection system is already connected, he explained quickly, fingers flying over his equipment. I can patch this footage directly to the main screen. Your sister chose the perfect setup for her own downfall. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel had insisted on the elaborate audiovisual setup, claiming it would make the speeches more memorable and ensure every guest could see and hear everything clearly. Well, she'd gotten her wish. I stood in that alcove, watching Rachel through the doorway as she adjusted the microphone and beamed at our guests. She looked so confident, so pleased with herself. In her mind, she was minutes away from watching me make a complete fool of myself in front of everyone we knew. Mrs. Hartford? Marcus was waiting for final confirmation. My head was still swimming from whatever Rachel had slipped me, but my resolve was crystal clear. Do it. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more family drama that'll make your own relatives look like angels. I walked back into the ballroom as normally as I could manage, sliding into my seat beside David just as Rachel tapped the microphone for attention. Good evening, everyone. Rachel's voice rang out cheerfully across the ballroom. For those who don't know me, I'm Rachel, Mia's older sister and maid of honor. Polite applause filled the room. I gripped David's hand under the table, and he squeezed back, probably thinking I was just emotional about the speech. I've had the privilege of watching Mia grow up, Rachel continued, her voice taking on that syrupy tone she used when she was being particularly manipulative. And I can honestly say that tonight, she's exactly where she deserves to be. More applause. Several guests raised their champagne flutes in anticipation of a toast. Rachel launched into what sounded like a prepared speech about sisterhood, love, and family bonds. She told cute stories about our childhood, made everyone laugh with tales of my teenage awkwardness, and generally painted herself as the devoted big sister who'd always looked out for me. Mia has always been special, she said, her eyes finding mine across the room. She has this way of getting exactly what she wants, exactly when she wants it. The words sounded loving, but I caught the edge underneath them. Only I knew what she really meant. So tonight, I want to make sure everyone sees the real Mia, Rachel continued, raising her champagne flute. The sister I know so well. That was Marcus's cue. The lights dimmed slightly as the large projection screen behind Rachel flickered to life. She turned, expecting to see a montage of family photos or perhaps a slideshow I'd prepared. Instead, she saw herself on screen, clear as day, reaching into her purse and pulling out that small vial. The ballroom fell silent as 300 guests watched Rachel empty the contents into my champagne flute, glance around furtively, and then stir it with her finger before stepping back with that satisfied smile. The footage was damning, crystal clear, well lit, impossible to deny or explain away. Rachel stood frozen at the microphone, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror as she realized what everyone was seeing. That's not, she stammered. But the microphone picked up every word. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before the room exploded into chaos. You know that moment in movies where everything happens in slow motion? When the protagonist's world shifts completely and time seems to stretch like taffy? This was nothing like that. This was immediate, brutal, and absolutely chaotic. The first reaction came from David's grandmother, who has never been known for her filter. Did that girl just poison the bride? Her voice carried clearly across the suddenly silent ballroom. That broke the dam. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once. Guests pulled out their phones, some taking photos of the screen where the footage was still playing on loop, others calling people who weren't there to tell them what was happening. My mother shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Turn that off!" she shouted toward Marcus, who pretended not to hear her. My father sat frozen, his face pale as he stared at the screen showing his eldest daughter committing what was essentially assault at his youngest daughter's wedding. Rachel tried to laugh it off, actually laughed. This is some kind of mistake, she said into the microphone, her voice shaking. That's not what it looks like. Really? The voice came from my college roommate, Sarah, who was standing near our table with her phone out, clearly recording everything. Because it looks like you drugged your sister at her own wedding. Rachel's composure cracked completely. I was trying to help her relax. Help me relax, with an unknown substance, at my wedding, in front of 300 people. Even for Rachel, that was impressively creative fiction. David finally found his voice. What did you give her? He demanded, standing up so abruptly his chair fell backward. What was in that vial? Nothing harmful, Rachel protested, but she was backing away from the microphone now, away from the screen still showing her crime. Just something to help with nerves. You mean something to make her sick? David's best man called out. He'd been a paramedic before medical school and clearly understood the implications better than most. My mother was now trying to physically reach Marcus to shut off the projection, but several guests, including David's father, who happens to be a lawyer, were blocking her path. "Everyone needs to see this," he said firmly. "This is evidence. Evidence." The word hung in the air like a sword. Rachel looked around wildly, searching for allies, for someone to help her explain this away. But even her closest friends were staring at her with horror and disbelief. "Mia," she said, turning toward me with desperate eyes. Tell them I would never hurt you." I stood up slowly, still feeling woozy but determined to end this. The room quieted as everyone waited for my response. "Actually, Rachel," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, "I can't tell them that, because you did hurt me. You've been hurting me for years." The admission surprised even me, but standing there, seeing her exposed in front of everyone, I realized this wasn't just about tonight. This was about a lifetime of subtle cruelties, manipulations, and betrayals that I'd been too loyal to acknowledge. "You're upset." Rachel tried again, her voice taking on that condescending tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," I replied. "And thanks to Marcus here, everyone else knows exactly what you did." That's when Rachel finally understood that this wasn't something she could talk her way out of, and that's when she completely lost control. Rachel's breakdown was spectacular in the worst possible way. First came the tears. Big, dramatic sobs that might have been effective if we weren't all still staring at video evidence of her crime. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking, making sounds like a wounded animal. "You don't understand," she wailed into the microphone she was somehow still holding. "It's not fair. Nothing is ever fair." The guests were riveted. You could have heard a pin drop if not for Rachel's theatrical sobbing. "Mia gets everything," she continued, her voice rising to a pitch that made several people wince. "Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect husband, perfect wedding. What do I get? What have I ever gotten?" My mother finally reached her and tried to pull her away from the microphone, but Rachel shrugged her off violently. "Don't touch me. This is everyone's fault." She spun around, addressing the crowd directly. "You all treat her like she's so special, so perfect, but she's not. She's selfish and spoiled, and she doesn't deserve any of this." David stepped forward, his face dark with fury. "Get away from my wife." "Your wife?" Rachel laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "Your precious wife who probably planned this whole thing to make me look bad." The accusation was so absurd, so completely divorced from reality, that several guests actually gasped. "I planned for you to drug me?" I asked, incredulous. "I planned for you to try to humiliate me at my own wedding?" "You've always been jealous of me," Rachel shot back, apparently forgetting that everyone had just watched her poison my drink. "You couldn't stand that I was the older sister, the responsible one, the one who took care of everyone." It was like watching someone rewrite history in real time, and badly. David's father had heard enough. "Security," he called to the hotel staff who'd been standing frozen near the entrance. "Please escort this woman out." "You can't throw me out," Rachel shrieked. "I'm family. I'm the maid of honor." "You're a criminal," David said coldly. "And you're not welcome here." Two security guards approached carefully, clearly unsure how to handle removing someone from a wedding. Rachel saw them coming and made one last desperate play. "Fine!" she screamed, throwing the microphone down so hard it created a feedback screech that made everyone cover their ears. "Fine! You want to know the truth? I'm tired of pretending to care about Saint Mia and her perfect little life." She started pulling off her maid of honor accessories. The corsage, the jewelry I'd given her, even the shoes I'd paid for, throwing them on the floor like a toddler having a tantrum. "I hate this wedding. I hate this dress. I hate watching you get everything I wanted while I get nothing." The security guards finally reached her, taking her arms gently but firmly. "You'll regret this, Mia," Rachel shouted as they guided her toward the exit. "When everyone sees what you really are, you'll regret this." The ballroom doors closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like the period at the end of a very long, very messy sentence. For a moment, nobody moved. 300 people sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Then David's grandmother started clapping. "Well," she announced to the room, "that was better entertainment than most weddings provide." And just like that, the tension broke. People started laughing, talking, moving around again. The band, bless them, struck up a gentle song as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that changed everything. I was no longer the naive little sister who trusted too easily. And Rachel was no longer my family. The rest of the evening took on a surreal quality. Like we were all actors who'd improvised past the end of the script and weren't quite sure what came next. The hotel staff were incredible. They quietly removed the projection equipment, refreshed everyone's drinks, and somehow made it feel like we were moving forward rather than recovering from disaster. The wedding planner, a consummate professional, smoothly announced that dinner service would continue and the dancing would begin shortly. But I could feel the undercurrent of shock and fascination rippling through the crowd. Guests kept glancing toward the doors where Rachel had been removed, then back at me with expressions of concern, curiosity, and something that looked almost like respect. David never left my side. His hand stayed firmly clasped in mine as we navigated the awkward transition back to celebration mode. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly during a lull in the well-wishers approaching our table. "Honestly, clearer than I have in years," I replied, and I meant it. Whatever Rachel had slipped me was wearing off, but more than that, a fog I hadn't even realized was there had lifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't making excuses for Rachel's behavior, wasn't trying to see her side of things, wasn't taking responsibility for her emotions. My parents approached our table cautiously, both looking shell-shocked and unsure of what to say. "Mia, honey," my mother began, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry. We had no idea she would... It's not your fault, Mom," I said, and I meant that too. Rachel made her choices. "But family is family," my father said weakly, falling back on the phrase that had excused Rachel's behavior for 31 years. "Maybe if we talk to her, help her understand." "Dad," I stood up, still holding David's hand for support. "Rachel drugged me, at my wedding, in front of 300 people, while cameras were rolling. There's no misunderstanding to clear up." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "But she's your sister." "No," I said quietly. "A sister doesn't try to destroy the most important day of your life because she's jealous. A sister doesn't spend months pretending to help you while planning to humiliate you." Rachel stopped being my sister the moment she put whatever was in that vial into my drink. The finality in my voice seemed to surprise them both. "What are you saying?" my mother asked. "I'm saying I'm done. Done making excuses for her. Done trying to understand her. Done letting her treat me like an obstacle to her happiness." I took a deep breath. "Rachel is no longer welcome in my life." My father looked stricken. "Mia, you can't mean that." "I absolutely mean that." I turned to look around the ballroom, at all the people who'd witnessed Rachel's meltdown. Everyone here saw what she did. They saw her try to drug me, saw her blame me for her own actions, saw her throw a tantrum when she got caught. That's who Rachel really is. David squeezed my hand supportively. "We support whatever decision you make," he said firmly. "But she's family," my mother repeated, as if the word was some kind of magical protection against consequences. "Family doesn't poison family," David replied before I could. "Family doesn't sabotage family. Family doesn't try to destroy someone's wedding because they're bitter about their own life." I looked at my parents. Really looked at them. "You can have a relationship with Rachel if you want to, but I won't. And I won't pretend to be okay with what she did for the sake of family peace." They exchanged glances, clearly hoping I'd calm down and change my mind once the shock wore off. They had no idea I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. The next morning, David and I were supposed to be on a plane to Italy for our honeymoon. Instead, we were sitting in our hotel suite dealing with the aftermath of Rachel's spectacular self-destruction. My phone had been ringing constantly since 6 a.m. Rachel had called 17 times, left 12 voicemails, and sent a stream of text messages that ranged from tearful apologies to angry accusations to bizarre justifications for her behavior. The final text, sent at 3:47 a.m., read, "You ruin my life just like you ruin everything. I hope you're happy." I showed it to David, who was packing our honeymoon luggage with the grim efficiency of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "She still doesn't get it," he said, shaking his head. "Even now, she's making herself the victim." My parents had called twice. My aunts and uncles were texting, and several wedding guests had reached out to check on me. The story was spreading, which was inevitable when someone has a public breakdown at a 300-person event. But the most interesting call came from Marcus, the photographer. "Mrs. Hartford, I wanted to discuss the wedding footage with you," he said carefully. "Obviously, last night's events weren't part of your planned documentation." "Obviously," I agreed. "I can edit the incident out entirely if you prefer. Create a version of the reception that doesn't include any of that." I considered this for a moment. I could pretend it never happened. Airbrush Rachel out of my wedding video like she'd never existed. "Actually, Marcus, I want you to keep it in." David looked up from our suitcase, surprised. "Keep it in?" Marcus sounded equally shocked. "All of it. Rachel drugging my drink, the revelation, her meltdown, everything. I want a complete record of what happened." "May I ask why?" I looked out the hotel window at the city waking up below us. "Because someday, when people try to rewrite history and make excuses for her behavior, I want proof of what really happened. I want evidence that I didn't overreact, didn't cut off my sister for no reason, didn't destroy the family over a misunderstanding. David sat down beside me, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're protecting yourself. I'm protecting the truth, I corrected. Rachel spent years gaslighting me, making me doubt my own perceptions of her behavior. Never again. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I understand. I'll prepare the complete documentation for you. After I hung up, David took my hand. David, are you sure about this? There's no going back once you draw that line. I thought about all the times I'd excused Rachel's cruelty, all the family gatherings where I'd pretended her cutting comments were just jokes, all the ways I'd made myself smaller to accommodate her insecurities. I've been going back my whole life, I said. It's time to move forward. The knock on our door interrupted my thoughts. Hotel security informed us that Rachel was in the lobby, demanding to see me. She's been there for 2 hours, the security officer explained. She's not causing a disturbance, but she refuses to leave until she talks to you. David and I looked at each other. We both knew this confrontation was inevitable. Okay, I said, but security stays close. We found Rachel in the lobby's seating area, looking like she'd slept in her car. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and she was wearing the same clothes from the night before. When she saw me, she jumped up with desperate energy. Mia, finally! I've been waiting for hours. We need to talk about last night. There's nothing to talk about, Rachel. Of course there is. She moved closer, but security stepped forward subtly. What happened was... It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was stressed about the speech, and I just wanted to help you relax, and... Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. Rachel's face crumpled. You're my sister. You can't just cut me off forever over one mistake. One mistake? I stared at her in disbelief. Rachel, you drugged me. You planned it. You brought the substance to my wedding. You waited for the perfect moment, and you did it hoping I'd embarrass myself in front of everyone we know. It wasn't supposed to be like that. Then what was it supposed to be like? Rachel opened and closed her mouth several times, clearly struggling to find an explanation that didn't make her look worse. Finally, she went with honesty. I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be embarrassed, to have everyone looking at you and judging you and finding you lacking. The admission hung in the air like a confession. You wanted me to feel humiliated at my own wedding because you feel humiliated by your own life? It's not fair, Rachel exploded, her voice echoing in the hotel lobby. Nothing is fair. You get everything and I get nothing. And there it was. The truth at the center of everything. Goodbye, Rachel, I said, turning toward the elevator. Mia, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me. The elevator doors closed on her desperate pleas, and I knew it was the last time I'd ever see my sister. The old Mia would have felt guilty about that. The new Mia felt free. 6 months later, David and I were finally enjoying the Italian honeymoon we'd postponed, sitting on a terrace in Tuscany with wine and pasta and the kind of peace that comes from making difficult but necessary decisions. My phone buzzed with a text from my college friend Sarah. Saw Rachel at the grocery store today. She tried to tell me the whole wedding thing was a misunderstanding and that you overreacted. I told her I was there and saw everything. She walked away. I showed the text to David, who shook his head. Still trying to rewrite history. Some people never change, I replied, deleting the message. The months since the wedding had been a revelation. Without Rachel's constant presence in my life, her demands for attention, her subtle put-downs, her emotional manipulation, I'd discovered who I actually was when I wasn't constantly managing someone else's feelings. I was funnier than I'd thought, more confident, more decisive, happier. My parents had struggled with my decision at first, continuing to reach out on Rachel's behalf for weeks after the wedding. But when I sent them Marcus's unedited footage and they saw the full scope of what Rachel had planned, their tune changed. We raised her better than this, my mother had said quietly after watching the video. I don't know where we went wrong. You didn't go wrong, I'd assured her. Some people just choose to be cruel. Rachel had tried various approaches to force her way back into my life. She'd sent flowers with apology notes, shown up at my workplace, even tried to contact David directly. Each attempt was met with the same response. Nothing. I'd learned that the most powerful thing you can do with a manipulator is refuse to engage. No anger, no explanations, no justifications. Just a complete withdrawal of your attention and energy. It drove her absolutely crazy, which proved it was the right approach. The wedding video had become something of a legend among our friends and family, not because people enjoyed watching Rachel's breakdown, but because it served as a cautionary tale about the importance of setting boundaries with toxic people. I should thank her, in a way, I told David as we watched the sunset paint the Tuscan hills gold. She did me a favor by showing everyone exactly who she was. How do you figure? Now nobody can ever tell me I was too harsh, or that I should give her another chance, or that family is family. They all saw what she did. They know why I made the choice I made. David raised his wine glass. To making hard choices that lead to better lives. I clinked my glass against his. To choosing peace over drama. To choosing yourself over dysfunction. To realizing that sometimes the best thing a toxic person can do is remove themselves from your wedding in the most dramatic way possible. We laughed. And it felt good. It felt free. Sometimes I wondered what Rachel was doing, whether she'd learned anything from the experience, whether she'd found some kind of peace in her own life. But those moments of curiosity passed quickly, replaced by gratitude for the silence where her chaos used to be. The girl who'd walked down the aisle 6 months ago, trusting and naive and desperate to keep everyone happy, felt like a different person. That girl would have eventually forgiven Rachel, made excuses for her behavior, allowed the cycle to continue. This woman, this wife, this survivor, this person who'd learned the difference between family and people who share your DNA, this woman was done with all of that. My wedding day had been ruined, but my marriage was stronger for it. My family was smaller, but the people who remained actually loved and supported me. My life was quieter, but the peace was profound. Rachel had intended to destroy my happiest day, but instead, she'd given me the greatest gift possible. She'd shown me exactly who I was when I stopped accommodating people who wished me harm. And that woman was magnificent. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe, and share your own experiences with toxic family members in the comments below. Sometimes the best thing that can happen at your wedding is discovering who truly belongs in your life, and who definitely doesn't. Remember, you don't owe anyone your peace, not even family. Especially not family.